The first thing I noticed was the quiet, the kind that presses against your ears until you realize something in your life has already slipped out of place. I'm 42 years old, and I used to believe silence meant peace. That night, standing alone in our kitchen with the lights off, I learned it can also mean betrayal warming itself in the dark. A year ago, my life looked solid from the outside. I worked as an IT engineer for a mid-sized company outside Columbus, steady hours, decent pay, no drama. My wife, Emily, had been with me since college. We met in a crowded lecture hall, shared cheap pizza, built a life brick by brick. We had 2 kids, Lucas, who was 12 and already taller than I wanted to admit, and Mia, 10 years old, all questions and paint-stained fingers. Emily taught at the same elementary school they attended. We were that family people pointed to and said, "They've got it figured out." I believed that too. Somewhere along the way, Emily started drifting. Not all at once. It was subtle, like a radio station slowly losing signal. She stayed late at school more often, said there were meetings, lesson plans, parent conferences. On weekends she'd disappear for an hour to clear her head, or visit a friend whose name I heard too often but never met. When she smiled, it didn't always reach her eyes. When I touched her, she felt far away, like she was already somewhere else and just borrowing her body to stand next to me. I told myself it was stress. Kids. Work. Life. That's what men like me do. We explain things away because the truth feels too expensive to face. Ryan, my younger brother, had been around more too. He'd always been the restless one, bouncing from job to job, charm doing the heavy lifting where responsibility fell short. My parents worried about him. I defended him. That was my role growing up. I was the steady one. Ryan was the storm everyone made excuses for. Emily said he was going through a rough patch, that he needed someone to talk to. I didn't think twice about her checking in on him. He was family. She was my wife. Trust was supposed to be automatic. The night everything began to crack, I came home early from a business trip. The meeting ended ahead of schedule, and for once I didn't call first. I wanted to surprise them. I remember pulling into the driveway and noticing Ryan's car parked down the street, half hidden by a maple tree. I told myself it meant nothing. He visited sometimes. That was normal. Inside, the house smelled different. Not bad, just unfamiliar. A sweeter kind of clean. I heard voices in the living room, low and careful. When I stepped in, Emily and Ryan were sitting at the table, too close, coffee cups untouched. They looked up at the same time, the way people do when they've been caught holding a breath too long. Nothing about the scene was openly wrong. Clothes on, distance that could be explained, smiles that tried too hard. "Didn't know you were back," Emily said. I nodded, said the meeting wrapped early. Ryan stood up fast, knocked his chair slightly out of place. He joked, said he was just heading out. I let him go. That night, after the kids were asleep and Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I didn't mean to look. That's the lie I still wrestle with. The screen lit up with a message preview, a name I knew too well. Ryan. My hand hovered there longer than it should have. Then I picked it up, and the silence I'd felt earlier finally made sense. I stood there with her phone in my hand, like it weighed 100 pounds. The screen went dark again, but the damage was done. My heart was already racing, not because I knew everything, but because I knew enough to be afraid of what came next. I sat at the kitchen table and unlocked the phone. I knew her code. That fact alone felt like a joke someone else was laughing at. The messages were right there, no effort required. No hidden folder, no password-protected app. Months of words, stretched out in a way that made it clear this wasn't a mistake or a moment. This was a second life. You get me in ways he never has. With him it's routine. With you it's real. I wish I'd met you first. I scrolled until my hands started to shake. There were dates, times, plans. Hotel names I recognized from work trips. Photos that weren't meant for me. Promises whispered through text like they were sacred. I didn't cry. Not then. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out and left the shell standing upright out of habit. When Emily came back into the kitchen, towel around her hair, she smiled like nothing in the world had shifted. She asked how the drive was. I told her I was tired. That was true, just not in the way she thought. That night, I lay awake listening to her breathe beside me, counting the seconds between inhales like it might anchor me to something solid. Every memory started replaying itself with a different filter. Late nights. Short tempers. The way Ryan's name slipped into conversations too easily. I wondered how long everyone else had known, or if it was just me, always last to catch up. Over the next few days, I didn't confront her. I moved through the house like a guest. I watched. I listened. I started saving things. Screenshots, call logs, emails she forgot to delete on the shared laptop. I hated myself for how calm I became. Like part of me had switched into survival mode and shut off the rest. Then I checked our bank account. At first, it looked normal. Bills paid, groceries, gas. But when I pulled the statements and really looked, patterns emerged. Small withdrawals here and there. Cash back at stores we didn't shop at. Charges for weekends she'd claimed were spent at a friend's place. Over months, it added up to nearly $5,000. Money we'd saved for the kids. For emergencies. For a future I was apparently the only one still investing in. What hurt more than the number was the method. Checks with my signature that I didn't remember signing. A handwriting close enough to mine that a bank teller wouldn't blink. It hit something old and ugly inside me. When we were kids, Ryan used to take money from my wallet. Not once or twice. Constantly. I'd notice a 20 missing, then a 10. When I told my mom, she'd sigh and say he needed it more than I did. He was younger. More sensitive. Always an excuse. I learned early that being reliable meant being taken from. Now it was happening again. Only this time the two people closest to me were working together. I finally told my dad. We met at his place, a small ranch house that smelled like old coffee and sawdust. I laid everything out on the table, one piece at a time. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, his jaw tightened in a way I recognized from childhood, the look he got when someone crossed a line they couldn't uncross. "This isn't just about you," he said quietly. "This is a betrayal of the whole family." He helped me find a lawyer the next day. Emily noticed the distance then. She tried to close it with gestures that came too late. Dinners. Soft voices. Talk of second chances. When I finally told her I knew, really knew, she broke down fast. Tears. Excuses. Blame wrapped in apologies. She said Ryan listened. That I was always working. That it just happened. I looked at her and realized the woman I'd married was already gone. What stood in front of me was someone trying to negotiate the consequences of her choices. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the shock and the pain, something else started to grow. Not rage. Not yet. Resolve. After I confronted Emily, the house stopped pretending to be a home. She cried hard that first night, the kind of crying meant to pull sympathy out of the air. She said she was confused, that she felt invisible, that Ryan just happened to be there when she needed someone. Every sentence slid the blame a little further away from her and closer to me, like she was rearranging furniture in a room that was already burning. I listened without interrupting. That seemed to unsettle her more than yelling would have. She kept searching my face for something to react to, something she could work with. I gave her nothing. The kids were asleep upstairs. That mattered. It was the only thing that mattered. I moved into the guest room that night. The bed was too short, the mattress too soft, but it felt honest. Lying there, staring at the ceiling fan, I understood something simple and brutal. This wasn't a conversation anymore. It was a process, and processes require patience. The next few weeks blurred together. Lawyers, paperwork, quiet breakfasts where Emily avoided my eyes and the kids sensed the tension like animals before a storm. Lucas grew quieter. Mia clung to me more than usual, slipping her hand into mine whenever she could, like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. Ryan tried to call. I didn't answer. He texted once, a long message about mistakes and love and how none of this was meant to hurt me. I deleted it without replying. Whatever bond we'd shared had snapped clean. There was nothing left to explain. Then the lawyer suggested a paternity test. He didn't push it. He just mentioned it, gently, like a man who's learned how to deliver bad news without flinching. He said in cases involving long-term affairs, especially when timelines overlap, it was something to consider. To protect myself legally. I agreed without thinking. Not because I doubted my children, but because everything I thought was solid had already betrayed me once. The results came back in a white envelope that felt heavier than it should have. Lucas was mine. No surprise there. He had my stubborn jaw, my way of going quiet when thinking. Mia wasn't. I read the report 3 times before the words made sense. My hands went numb. My chest tightened until breathing felt optional. Emily collapsed into a chair when I showed her, sobbing so hard she could barely speak. She said it was from years ago, a colleague from the school. One night, A stupid mistake she'd buried so deep she convinced herself it didn't matter. She said she thought Mia was mine, that she didn't want to know the truth. I looked at my daughter through the doorway, sitting on the floor with her crayons, humming to herself. 10 years of bedtime stories. Scraped knees. School plays. All of it real. All of it mine, no matter what a piece of paper said. I told the lawyer I wanted to adopt her. Emily looked at me like she couldn't understand why I'd do that after everything. The truth was simple. Mia didn't betray me. The adults did. Court was quiet. Clinical. The judge asked Mia if she wanted me to stay her dad. She nodded without hesitation, eyes wide, trusting. That nod broke something in me and rebuilt it at the same time. A month later, Emily suggested one last family outing. A picnic. Closure, she called it. For the kids. I agreed. It was raining that morning, the kind of cold drizzle that turns roads slick and nerves sharp. Emily drove. Her hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. She kept glancing at me like she wanted reassurance I no longer knew how to give. On a curve just outside town, the car skidded. There was a moment where time slowed, where I saw the guardrail rushing toward us and thought, this is it. This is how everything ends. Then the impact came. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The world snapped forward and back in a violent blur. When it stopped, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and rain. The kids were crying. I checked them first, hands shaking, voice steady by force of will. Cuts. Bruises. Nothing life-threatening. Emily wasn't so lucky. At the hospital, while she drifted in and out under medication, she kept whispering a name. Ryan. I stood there listening, feeling something finally settle into place. Not anger. Not hatred. Clarity. Whatever mercy I still had for her stayed in that hospital room. I walked out knowing the next phase of my life wouldn't be about saving what was broken. It would be about justice. The hospital released me 2 days later with bruised ribs, a concussion that came with constant headaches, and a stack of paperwork thicker than my patience. I went home alone. Emily stayed behind with her broken arm and fractured version of the truth. The kids stayed with my dad until I could stand upright without feeling like the room was tilting. The house felt different when I walked in by myself. Too clean. Too quiet. Like it was waiting to see what kind of man I'd be without the illusion of a family holding me in place. I sat in my old office, the one we'd once joked about turning into a playroom, and stared at the shelves lined with photos from better years. Smiling faces frozen in time, pretending none of this was coming. That's when I started writing things down. Not feelings. Facts. Dates. Transfers. Messages. The accident report. Medical notes. Every lie I could trace back to a decision Emily made. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing a record. There's a difference, even if the line looks thin from the outside. The divorce moved faster after the accident. Her lawyer tried to paint her as overwhelmed, emotionally fragile, pressured by circumstances. My lawyer laid out the evidence without raising his voice. Infidelity. Financial fraud. Forged signatures. The pattern mattered more than any single act. Then came the call from my dad. He sounded tired in a way I hadn't heard before. He told me Emily had contacted my parents. Both of them. She'd cried. Apologized. Asked them to convince me to give her another chance. When that didn't work, she'd tried something else. She'd submitted paperwork to enroll Lucas in a residential discipline program. Claimed it was my idea. Used a scanned version of my signature. My dad caught it before anything could move forward. He took it straight to my lawyer. That was the moment the court stopped seeing Emily as a woman who'd made mistakes and started seeing her as a risk. The custody hearing was short. The judge didn't look at me much. He didn't need to. The file spoke for itself. I was awarded full custody. Emily was granted limited visitation under supervision. Child support was calculated at the minimum. She didn't argue. She just stared at the floor like gravity had finally won. Ryan never showed up to anything. By then he'd left town. No forwarding address. No goodbye. My parents cut him off completely. My mom cried for weeks, mourning the son she kept defending long after he stopped deserving it. Emily moved in with her sister. The same sister who'd covered for her late nights and secret weekends. I heard they fought a lot. Secrets have a way of turning on the people who keep them. I focused on the kids. Lucas joined a boxing gym. Not because he was angry, but because he needed somewhere to put the energy he couldn't explain. Mia started art classes. She painted houses with strong lines and bright colors, every window lit. I bought a new place across town, smaller, quieter, with no echoes of arguments in the walls. I started therapy too, not because I felt broken, but because I didn't trust myself not to become something I didn't recognize. I talked about anger, about guilt, about the strange sense of relief that came with knowing the truth, even when it hurt. One night, weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. I recognized Ryan's voice immediately. He said he wanted to explain, that he was sorry, that he missed his family. I deleted it. Some doors don't lead anywhere worth going back to. Sitting alone in my new office, surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked yet, I realized something important. Justice hadn't come with fireworks or shouting. It came quietly, through documents and decisions, and the steady refusal to be manipulated. The past still cast long shadows, but they were behind me now. And for the first time in a year, I slept through the night. Life settled into a rhythm I didn't expect, but learned to respect. Morning started early. I made coffee strong enough to wake the dead, packed lunches, reminded Lucas about his gloves and Mia about her sketchbook. We argued about homework and screen time like any normal family. On the surface, it probably looked ordinary. Underneath, everything was different. Every laugh felt earned. Every quiet moment felt fragile and valuable. Emily showed up for her supervised visits on schedule. She looked smaller each time, like the weight of her choices was slowly pressing her inward. The kids were polite with her. Careful. Lucas kept conversations short. Mia hugged her, but there was hesitation there now, a pause before contact that hadn't existed before. I watched without interfering. The damage wasn't mine to repair. I thought the worst was behind us. I was wrong. It started with an email from my lawyer marked urgent. Ryan had resurfaced. He'd been arrested 2 states over for credit card fraud and identity theft. Not mine, but the pattern was familiar enough to make my stomach tighten. During the investigation, his name came up connected to an old joint account he'd once shared with Emily for household emergencies. An account I'd never known existed. The prosecutor's office wanted statements, documentation, context. I spent an entire afternoon digging through old files, finding traces I'd missed before, transfers that lined up with his travel, charges that matched hotel stays from Emily's messages. It became clear this wasn't just an affair. It was a partnership. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They'd used my stability to fund their recklessness. When I gave my statement, I kept my voice even. I answered questions. I handed over evidence. The investigator thanked me and said something that stuck. People like this don't stop on their own, he said. They escalate. That night, I sat alone after the kids were asleep, staring at the city lights outside the window. I realized justice wasn't finished with my family yet. It was just changing shape. Emily called the next day, frantic. She'd heard about Ryan's arrest. She wanted to know if I'd said anything about her, if she was in danger, if I could help her. I told her the truth. I said I answered questions honestly. Nothing more, nothing less. She cried. She said Ryan had manipulated her, that she'd been afraid to say no, that she was trying to rebuild her life, and this would destroy her. I listened. Then I said something I'd practiced in therapy. I'm not responsible for protecting you from the consequences of your choices. She hung up without saying goodbye. Weeks later, the formal charges came down. Ryan was indicted. Emily was named as a cooperating witness, not a defendant, but her role was laid bare in black ink. The school placed her on administrative leave pending review. Parents whispered. Friends disappeared. The safety net she'd taken for granted unraveled thread by thread. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I focused on my kids and my work and the slow rebuilding of trust in myself. One evening, Lucas asked me if people ever really pay for what they do. He wasn't angry when he asked, just curious, older than his years in that moment. I told him the truth as I understood it. Sometimes they do, I said, and sometimes paying looks different than we expect. But what matters is what we choose to build after. He nodded like he was filing that away for later. That night, after the house went quiet, I opened my old notebook again. I added one final line beneath the facts and dates. This wasn't revenge. This was accountability. And I knew, deep down, that the last shadow hadn't passed yet. The last shadow arrived without warning, the way real trouble usually does. It was a Thursday evening. I was grilling chicken in the backyard, the kids inside arguing over a movie, when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Something told me not to. It was a detective from the county where Ryan had been arrested. He spoke calmly, professionally, like this was just another case on his desk. He said Ryan had decided to stop cooperating halfway. He was claiming Emily had coerced him, that she'd pushed him, planned things, used him as cover. He wanted to trade his version of the story for leniency. And your name came up, the detective said. I closed my eyes and felt that old pressure behind my ribs again. They wanted to know if Emily had ever tried to shift blame onto me. If she'd mentioned fear, control, manipulation. If there was any history of violence. Any record that could support Ryan's claim. I told them the truth. There was none. After the call, I stood there longer than necessary, the chicken burning, smoke curling into the dark. I understood then that people like Ryan don't just betray. They rewrite. If they're drowning, they'll grab anyone within reach and pull them under too. Emily showed up at my door 2 days later, unannounced. She looked wrecked. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back like she didn't care how it looked anymore. She said the detective had questioned her. That Ryan was lying. That he was trying to destroy her. She asked if she could come in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her. I just said no. We stood there on the porch, two people who used to share a bed now separated by more than a door. She told me she was scared. That she didn't sleep anymore. That everyone saw her as a monster. I believed her fear. I just didn't feel responsible for it. You made a series of choices, I said. And now you're living in them. She asked if I hated her. I thought about it for a moment and surprised myself with the answer. No, I said. I don't trust you. And I don't need you. That's different. She left without another word. A week later, Ryan took a plea deal. Federal charges. Multiple counts. Several years. No early release. His final statement blamed everyone but himself. The judge didn't buy it. Neither did I. When it was over, I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was still tight. Not joy. Relief. Like a long, low note finally fading out. Emily wasn't spared, just sidelined. Her teaching license was suspended pending ethics review. Civil suits followed. Nothing dramatic. Just consequences stacking quietly, one after another. At home, life kept moving. Lucas won his first amateur match at the gym. He didn't smile afterward. He just looked calm, focused, proud in a quiet way. Mia finished a painting she titled Safe Place. It was our new house, every window glowing, 3 figures inside. All of them smiling. I hung it in the hallway. Therapy got easier. The anger dulled into something manageable. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. Stopped wondering what I could have done differently. Some questions don't deserve answers. One night, as I tucked Mia into bed, she asked if families can break and still be real. I kissed her forehead and told her the truth. Families aren't walls, I said. They're promises. And promises can be kept, even when people fail. She fell asleep holding my hand. Sitting alone later, I realized justice hadn't arrived all at once. It came in layers. In courtrooms and classrooms. In silence and sleepless nights. In choosing not to become bitter. The past had taken enough from me. I wasn't giving it anything else. By the time fall settled in, I stopped measuring time by court dates and phone calls. I started measuring it by smaller things. Lucas asking me to spot him at the gym. Mia waking me up on Saturday mornings because she couldn't wait to show me a new sketch. The smell of leaves and cold air when we walked to school together. That's when Emily tried one last time. I found the envelope in my mailbox on a Monday afternoon. Handwritten address. No return name. I knew who it was before I opened it. Inside was a letter, several pages long, written in the same careful handwriting she used on birthday cards and permission slips. She wrote about regret. About therapy. About how losing everything had forced her to see clearly. She said she finally understood what she'd done to me, to the kids, to herself. She didn't ask to come back. She asked to be forgiven. Said she needed it to move forward. I read it once. Then again. Forgiveness is a strange word. People use it like a key, as if it opens doors that should stay locked. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. I didn't tear it up. I didn't respond either. Some things don't need an answer to be complete. A week later, I ran into her sister at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable, trapped between loyalty and shame. She said Emily wasn't doing well, that she talked about the kids constantly, that she still believed, deep down, that I'd come around. I told her I hoped Emily found peace. I meant it. Peace doesn't require access to my life. That night, Lucas asked if his mom was ever coming back. I told him the truth, carefully, the way you handle fragile glass. She'll always be your mom, I said. But this is our home now. He nodded. Then he asked something harder. Did she love you? I thought about that longer than he probably expected. I think she loved how safe things felt, I said. But love is what you do when it's hard, not when it's easy. He didn't argue. He just leaned back into the couch and stared at the ceiling, processing in his own quiet way. A few days later, I got a call from my lawyer. Ryan had filed an appeal. It was weak, desperate, but it meant paperwork, statements, the past knocking again. I felt the familiar irritation rise, then fade. Handle it, I said. I'm done carrying this. And I was. That weekend, we drove out of town to a state park. No phones, no schedules, just trees, trails, and a cabin that smelled like wood and dust. At night, we sat around a small fire. Lucas poked at the embers. Mia rested her head on my shoulder. For the first time since everything collapsed, I felt something close to whole. Not because the damage was undone, but because it no longer defined us. Lying in the dark later, listening to the wind move through the trees, I understood something simple and final. Justice isn't about watching someone else fall. It's about standing back up and refusing to live on your knees. Whatever ghosts were left from my past, they no longer lived here. And I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Winter came early that year, the kind that settles in your bones and makes the world feel smaller. The days grew shorter, the mornings darker. I found comfort in routines. Coffee before sunrise, scraping ice off the windshield, walking the kids to the bus stop while our breath hung in the air like smoke. That's when the lawsuit arrived. Not criminal. Civil. Emily's sister and her husband were suing me for emotional damages tied to the divorce and Ryan's prosecution. The claim was thin, almost insulting, but it was real enough to require a response. Their argument was simple and absurd, that my refusal to reconcile had escalated everything, that my cooperation with investigators had caused unnecessary harm. When my lawyer explained it, I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it finally showed me how desperate they'd become. When people run out of truth, they reach for noise. We filed a motion to dismiss. Attached evidence. Timelines. Records. The judge threw it out within weeks. No hearing. No drama. Just a stamped decision and a quiet end. That should have been the last of it. But a few days later, Emily called. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. Her voice was flat, tired, stripped of performance. She said her sister blamed her now, that the family she'd leaned on was cracking under the weight of what she'd dragged into their lives. She said she felt alone. I listened. Then she said something that surprised me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. But I need you to know I never stopped loving the kids. And I never meant to hurt you like this. There it was. The final version of the story she needed to tell herself. I believe you didn't plan to destroy everything, I said. But intent doesn't erase impact. She was quiet for a long moment. I don't know who I am anymore, she said. I knew that feeling too well to dismiss it. But I also knew something she didn't yet understand. You'll figure it out, I said. Just not with us. When the call ended, I sat there longer than usual, phone resting in my hand. It felt like closing a book I'd been reading against my will for years. A week later, the appeal was denied. Ryan was out of options. The chapter was officially closed. I took the kids out for pizza that night. Nothing fancy. Just a booth, greasy slices, and laughter echoing off cheap walls. Lucas told me he wanted to study physical therapy someday. Mia said she wanted to be an architect so she could design houses that made people feel safe. I told them both they could be anything they wanted. Driving home, snow falling softly under the streetlights, I realized something important. The revenge I'd imagined in my darkest moments never came. What came instead was stability. Truth. A life that didn't need secrets to function. At home, I tucked the kids in, turned off the lights, and stood in the hallway for a moment, listening to the quiet. The silence was back. But this time, it didn't hurt. Spring arrived slowly, the kind that teases you with warmer days and sudden showers. I started spending more time outdoors with the kids, teaching Lucas how to throw a baseball properly, and helping Mia sketch the trees in our backyard. Their laughter became the soundtrack of my life, filling spaces that had once been occupied by betrayal and tension. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the horizon, Mia asked me something I wasn't expecting. Dad, do you ever miss Mom? I paused. Her eyes were wide, serious, searching for honesty in the small lines of my face. I thought about Emily, her lies, her manipulations, the chaos she left behind. I thought about Ryan and the way he vanished when consequences caught up. I thought about how far we'd come and how fragile peace had been in the past year. I don't miss her the way I miss you too, I said slowly. I miss who I thought we all were, but I don't miss the pain. She nodded, accepting that answer as enough for now. Lucas threw his glove at a stray leaf and laughed, breaking the heaviness of the moment. I smiled, letting myself feel it, the simple joy of being fully present without fear of deception creeping in. Life had become routine in the best sense of the word. I started coaching Lucas's Little League team, spending evenings helping Mia build intricate models for her art class, and finally, I allowed myself to relax in ways I hadn't since discovering the truth. The house felt alive again, full of noise, energy, and purpose. One Saturday morning, while making pancakes, I got a call from Emily's lawyer. It was brief and professional. They wanted to discuss supervised visitation adjustments. I listened politely and declined. It wasn't anger or spite, it was clarity. I had nothing left to negotiate. My children were my responsibility, and that meant protecting them from further instability. By late afternoon, Lucas came into the kitchen, sweaty from soccer practice, and asked if we could build a treehouse in the backyard. Mia immediately agreed, already sketching the plans on scrap paper. As I looked at them, I realized something profound. The past year had been defined by betrayal, lies, and accidents that could have shattered us completely. But here we were, moving forward, creating something tangible, something lasting. The treehouse wasn't just wood and nails. It was a symbol that life could be rebuilt, stronger than before. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone in the living room with a notebook and pen. I wrote down everything. The affair, the theft, the lies, the court cases, the accident, the children's paternity tests, the therapy, and the slow, painstaking reclamation of our lives. I wrote not out of bitterness, but as a record of survival. For the first time, I felt like the story belonged to me entirely. Not to Emily, not to Ryan, not to anyone else. I closed the notebook and stared out the window. The yard was quiet, the treehouse partially assembled in the fading light, a promise of laughter and safety for the seasons to come. And in that quiet, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. I was free. Not free from memory, not free from scars, but free from the control of anyone else's choices over my happiness. The past had shaped us, yes, but it no longer defined us. And that truth, more than anything, felt like justice finally served. Summer arrived like a whisper, soft and golden, filling the mornings with light that made the house feel alive in a way I hadn't known it could. The treehouse was finished. Lucas climbed up first, laughing as Mia followed with her art supplies, already claiming it as her sketching nook. I stood at the base, hands on my hips, watching them fill it with life, imagining forts, secret meetings, and afternoons lost in imagination. I thought about the year behind me, the lies, the betrayals, the accident that almost took everything. I thought about Emily, about Ryan, about how fragile trust can be and how easily it can be shattered. But standing there, hearing my children's laughter, I realized something. The power wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. I'd chosen what mattered. I'd chosen to protect, to rebuild, to rise. That evening, we sat on the porch together, Lucas with his baseball glove, Mia with her sketches spread across the railing, and me just breathing in the quiet. I told them stories of my own childhood, about the mistakes I'd made and the lessons I'd learned. They listened with wide eyes, not judging, not questioning, just present. For the first time, I understood the true meaning of family. It wasn't about who was blood or who had made mistakes. It was about who showed up, who stayed, who worked every day to create safety, trust, and love. Later that night, after tucking them in, I walked through the empty house, each room a reminder of battles fought and won in silence. I paused in front of the old photo wall, pictures of Emily, Ryan, the kids, me, taken before everything fell apart. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel grief. I felt clarity. Life was messy, unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but it was ours, and we had survived it. I sat at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote one final line. The past tried to define us. We chose a different story. I closed the book, turned off the light, and went to bed. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying the scent of summer grass. For the first time in years, I slept without fear, without rage, without shadows pressing in. The past was behind me. The future belonged to us, and I would hold it steady, for Lucas, for Mia, and for myself. I had lost much, yes, but I had reclaimed everything that truly mattered. Life, love, and justice weren't about punishment. They were about endurance, about standing back up, about choosing the people who deserved your trust and refusing to be anything less than who you needed to be. And in that choice, I found peace.